All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, today's topic is something that I think a lot of people kind of shy away from, male infertility. But we're going to tackle it head on. And we've got like some seriously fascinating research to help us along the way. We're talking excerpts from Causes of Male Infertility, a document straight out of UpToDate.
UpToDate, it's considered a gold standard, a really top-notch medical resource.
For sure. For sure. And the best part, it was just updated last May, so we're dealing with the latest and greatest here.
Fresh off the presses.
Totally. So, our main goal today, what we're really aiming for is to, break down those big causes of male infertility, uncover some of those facts that'll make you go, huh, I didn't know that. And maybe even bust a few of those myths floating around out there. By the time we're done, you'll be like the male infertility expert among your friends.
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
Right. So before we, get into all the technical stuff, let's just talk about how common male infertility actually is. I think there's this idea out there that, when couples struggle to conceive, it's mainly the woman's issue. But research is showing that's not the whole story at all.
Not even close. It's way more common than people think. There was this study by the World Health Organization, and get this, they found that in about 20% of couples who are having trouble conceiving, the male factor was the only cause.
Wow, 20%, that's huge.
It is. And another 27%, it was a combo of both male and female factors. So, it's definitely not just a woman's problem, like some people might think.
That's really interesting. This report even mentions that nailing down those exact percentages, it's actually pretty tricky. It seems like definitions and how they do the research, it varies so much from study to study that it's hard to be super precise. But one thing seems pretty clear. Age plays a role, right?
Age definitely plays a role, and it's not just for women.
Right.
The research points out that men over 40, their fertility rates, they also start to decline.
Yeah.
It's not as drastic a change as it is for women, but it's definitely something to consider.
Makes sense. And, it's amazing to me how much we're still learning about all of this. It's like we think we know things, and then bam, new research comes out.
It's true. The science is constantly evolving. And here's another interesting tidbit from the research. Sperm quality, it can vary, like a lot, even within the same country.
Really? Wow. Okay. So someone living in, I don't know, let's say New York City could have totally different sperm quality than someone living in rural Montana.
Potentially, yeah. It really makes you think about all the things that could be at play there, right? Genetics, lifestyle choices, environmental factors. I mean, the list goes on and on. It shows just how complex this issue really is.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Okay, so we've established that male infertility is more common than people think, and there are a million potential factors.
Right.
And this research, it breaks down the causes into 4 main categories. Ready to tackle those?
Yeah, let's dive in. First up, we've got endocrine and systemic disorders. Now, these are basically all about hormonal imbalances that mess with sperm production.
Okay, so hormones. And I know this is where it starts to get, a little bit technical, but stick with us, folks. We'll break it down. So how do those hormonal imbalances actually impact sperm production? What's the connection there?
Imagine sperm production like a really complex choreographed dance, right? And the hormones, they're the music. Hormones like GnRH, that's gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Then you got FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone.
Okay, a lot of acronyms.
I know, right? But these guys, they're the conductors of the whole sperm-making orchestra. If their signals are off, the whole dance falls apart.
I love that analogy. So what kind of things can throw these hormones out of whack?
Well, it could be something, a guy's born with, like Kallmann syndrome, which is this rare condition where the body just doesn't produce GnRH. But most of the time, it's actually acquired disorders that develop later on.
Acquired disorders. So, what are some examples of those?
Oh, there's a whole range, actually. You got tumors that affect the pituitary gland, which is like the master hormone regulator. Then there are certain infections, even lifestyle factors like obesity and some medications.
Wait a minute. So obesity can actually impact a man's fertility?
It can. It's linked to hormonal imbalances, but also just a higher scrotal temperature, which, sperm don't like it too hot. And it's not just obesity. Smoking, too much heat exposure, those can all contribute to endocrine disorders.
It's amazing how everything is connected. There's been a lot of talk lately about marijuana use and whether it affects sperm. Does this research touch on that at all?
It does mention it. There are some studies suggesting that marijuana, it might have an effect on sperm parameters, but the research, it's not conclusive yet. We need more data, more research to really understand what's going on there.
Seems like so many things can impact those hormones. Okay, on to the next category. And this one's a mouthful, primary testicular defects. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So this category, it's all about problems that originate within the tests themselves, and it often affects the process of spermatogenesis, which is basically how sperm are made. And get this category, it's the most common one. We're talking a whopping 70–80% of male infertility cases.
That is a lot. So with these defects, are doctors usually able to pinpoint a cause, or is it more of a mystery?
It can be both. A lot of times it's what we call idiopathic dyspermatogenesis, meaning we
Yeah.
don't have a clear explanation. But there are definitely cases where we can identify specific causes, and some of those, they're genetic.
Genetic. Okay, that's interesting. Can you give us an example of a genetic cause?
Yeah. One that's relatively common is Y chromosome microdeletions.
Yeah.
So that basically means there are like missing pieces of genetic material on the Y chromosome, and that can mess with sperm production. And here's the thing, these deletions can be passed down from fathers to sons.
Wow. So if a man has this condition, his sons could inherit it, and that could impact their fertility too. That's kind of scary to think about.
It can be. And that's why, genetic testing and counseling, they're really important for men with these types of conditions.
Makes you realize, like, how much we still don't know about our own bodies.
Right.
Are there other genetic conditions that can cause infertility?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Another one is Klinefelter syndrome. It affects about 1 in 500 to 700 men. And most men with this, they have very small tests, and they might not have any sperm in their ejaculate at all. That's called the zoospermia.
So sometimes it's not even just about a low sperm count, but like having no sperm at all. That's
Yeah.
wow. Are all the causes of these testicular defects genetic?
No, not all of them. We also have non-genetic causes like undescended testicles, that's called cryptorchidism, or even infections like mumps, believe it or not. Mumps can sometimes lead to infertility in adults.
Mumps. Seriously, I thought that was just a childhood thing.
It usually is, but sometimes it can have these long-term consequences. It just shows you how complex this whole topic is.
It really does. Okay, so we've covered those first two big categories, all the hormone stuff and then problems within the tests themselves. What's number 3 on the list?
All right, so the third category is sperm transport disorders. And these are basically any issues that prevent sperm from, getting to where they need to go to fertilize an egg. Think of it like an obstacle course for sperm.
An obstacle course. Okay, I like that. So walk me through this. Where exactly do sperm need to go, and what kind of things can get in the way?
So sperm, they start in the testes, right?
Ah.
And then they travel through this long coiled tube called the epididymis. And that's where they mature and, get this, learn how to swim.
Wait, they have to learn to swim.
They do. It's wild, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so from the epididymis, they move into another tube. It's called the vas deferens. And this tube carries them up and over the bladder towards the prostate gland. And it's along this pathway that things can go wrong.
I see. So like blockages. What
Yeah.
causes those?
Well, a few things. Infections like gonorrhea or chlamydia, those can cause scarring and blockages. Sometimes a man might just be born with a missing or blocked vas deferens, and that's often linked to mutations in the gene that causes cystic fibrosis, actually.
So a man could have this genetic issue that affects his fertility without even knowing he carries the cystic fibrosis gene.
Exactly. It can be a big surprise. And then, of course, you have vasectomy, which is, an intentional blockage.
Right, that those can sometimes be reversed, right?
They can in some cases. It's not always successful, but it's possible.
Man, this is all so fascinating, but I gotta say, it's also kind of overwhelming. There are so many things that can go wrong.
I know, right? It's a lot to take in. But remember, each of these categories, they only represent a small percentage of cases overall.
It's good to remember. Okay, so we've got the hormone issues, the problems in the tests themselves, and then the sperm's obstacle course. What's that final category?
Okay, last but not least, we have idiopathic male infertility. And this one can be particularly frustrating for couples because it basically means a man has normal semen analysis. His sperm count looks good, motility, morphology, all of that checks out. But he's still unable to conceive.
So all the tests come back normal, but something's still not working. That must be really tough to deal with. Does the research offer any clues about what might be going on in those cases?
To be honest, not really. This is where we really hit the limits of what we currently understand. There might be some subtle factors we haven't discovered yet, or maybe it's like these complex interactions between different things that we just don't fully grasp.
So a big mystery.
Basically, yeah. And that's exactly why ongoing research in this area is so important. We got to keep searching for those answers to help these couples.
Well, hopefully this deep dive will inspire some future researchers out there.
Mm.
Now, before we wrap up this first part, I want to touch on something else that was mentioned in the research. The link between male infertility and testicular cancer.
Right, that's a really important point. The research does mention that there's a higher incidence of testicular cancer in men who are infertile.
Okay, so that's definitely concerning. Does that mean every man with infertility should get screened for testicular cancer?
Not necessarily. The research doesn't recommend routine screening for everyone, but it does emphasize how important self-exams are.
So be aware of the link and, check yourself regularly.
Got it. I think we covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We did. We talked about how common male infertility is and went deep into those 4 major categories of causes. But this is just the beginning.
That's right. We've talked about all the things that can go wrong, but next time we're going to explore what can be done about it. We'll be discussing all the treatments and interventions for male infertility, so stay tuned for part 2.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So last time we really got into the nitty-gritty of what causes male infertility, and I gotta say, we learned a lot. It's way more complicated than I think a lot of people realize, from genetics to hormones to even just lifestyle choices. It's pretty mind-blowing, honestly.
It is. It's incredibly complex.
But, just knowing the causes, that's just the first step.
Right.
What we really want to know is what can be done about it.
Exactly, because understanding the causes, that's super important, but it's those treatments and interventions, those are the things that really give couples facing this challenge hope, real solutions.
Totally. So based on this up-to-date research, what are some of the ways male infertility is actually treated? Is there a one-size-fits-all solution, or does it totally depend on what's causing the problem?
It definitely depends on the underlying cause. There's no magic bullet, unfortunately. For example, if a guy has a hormonal imbalance, the treatment's going to focus on trying to correct that imbalance, usually with medication.
Right. So going back to that whole sperm production dance analogy, if the hormones aren't playing their part, medication can kind of step in and help get things back in sync.
Yeah, exactly. It's like fine-tuning the orchestra a little bit. But I do want to mention, this research, it doesn't go into specific treatment protocols or anything like that. It's more about giving a broad overview of, different approaches.
I got it. So it's all about giving us that solid foundation. Okay, so we talked about medication for those hormonal issues. But what about those primary testicular defects we were talking about? The ones where, there are problems within the tests themselves. What can you do about those?
That's where things get a little trickier. Because if the defect is genetic, there's often no way to actually fix the underlying problem, But the good news is there are still options for men to become fathers, even in these cases.
That's good to hear. What kind of options?
Well, assisted reproductive technologies, or ART, have really been a game changer in the field of infertility. I mean, ART-T has made parenthood a reality for so many couples who might not have had a chance before.
Yeah, I've heard of ART, but to be honest, I'm not really clear on what all it involves.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little refresher?
Sure. So ART, that includes things like in vitro fertilization, IVF, you've probably heard of that one, right?
Yeah.
And then intracytoplasmic sperm injection, which is a mouthful, so we just call it ICSI.
Okay, IVF, that's the one where they combine the egg and sperm in a lab to make embryos, right?
Exactly. And ICSI takes it a step further. They actually inject a single sperm directly into an egg. And that can be super helpful for men who have very low sperm counts or if their sperm don't swim so well.
So even if a guy has very few sperm or they're just bad swimmers, there's still a chance. That's pretty incredible.
It is. I mean, these technologies, they've revolutionized the way we approach infertility. It's amazing what science can do these days.
It really is. Okay, so RT can help men with those genetic causes of infertility, but does it also work for those cases where, the cause is unknown, or for those sperm transport issues we talked about?
Absolutely. RT can be a very versatile approach. So for example, if the sperm can't get to the egg naturally because there's a blockage, RT can help them bypass that obstacle course.
It's like giving those little swimmers a shortcut. Man, this is really mind-blowing stuff. Makes you wonder what other advancements are coming in the future.
I know. But But, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We talked about medication for those hormonal problems and RT for genetic defects and those sperm transport issues. But what about those lifestyle factors we talked about before, the things that guys can actually, like, control? Can those be addressed too?
That's right. We were talking about how things like obesity, smoking, even just being exposed to certain toxins in the environment, all of those can play a role. Is there anything men can do to, like, reduce those risks?
Absolutely. In fact, lifestyle modifications, those are often the first line of treatment for male infertility, and they can be surprisingly effective.
Really? So, like, what kind of changes can men make that could actually improve their fertility?
Well, if a guy is overweight or obese, losing weight is usually recommended. Remember how we were talking about how obesity can throw off those hormones?
Yeah, and how it can increase scrotal temperature?
Exactly. So dropping even a few pounds can make a difference. Another big one is quitting smoking. I mean, smoking, we know it decreases sperm count, how well they move, their morphology, it affects it all.
So kicking the habit can really give those little swimmers a fighting chance.
It can. And it's not just smoking. Drinking too much alcohol, that can also damage sperm.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a connection there.
Yeah, it's not talked about as much as smoking, but the research does suggest a link. So moderation is key when it comes to alcohol.
Okay, good to know. What about those environmental toxins we mentioned? Is there anything men can do to, like, reduce their exposure to those?
That can be tricky, but there are some steps guys can take. Choosing organic produce, avoiding pesticides, even being careful about what chemicals are in those personal care products they use. All of that can make a difference
So it's really about making those conscious choices, to protect yourself.
to protect your fertility.
Exactly. And there are actually some supplements that are thought to help protect sperm from that environmental damage. Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, antioxidants, things like vitamin C and E, those are often mentioned. But I always say it's best to talk to your doctor before you start taking anything new. They can help figure out what's best for your situation.
Right. Always consult with a professional. Okay, so we've got weight loss, quitting smoking, cutting back on the booze, being smart about environmental toxins, and maybe adding some supplements. That's a lot that men can do, to be proactive about their fertility.
It is. And these lifestyle changes are often used together with other treatments like medication or RT.
So it's all about finding the right combo, what works best for each individual.
Exactly. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to this stuff. Every man's journey with infertility is different.
I feel like this has been really empowering information. It's like a reminder that men actually have a lot of control when it comes to their reproductive health.
I agree. But it's also important to remember that, even though we've come a long way in treating male infertility, there's still so much we don't know. And the research, it's constantly going, we're learning more and more every day.
You mentioned earlier that the future of this field is exciting. Like, what kind of advancements are researchers working on? What can we look forward to?
Oh, there are so many promising avenues of research happening right now. Scientists are exploring new technologies, personalized medicine, even just getting a deeper understanding of the human genome and how it all ties into fertility.
It's really incredible to think about what might be possible in the future.
It is, and it gives real hope to anyone out there who's struggling with this. As we learn more about the mysteries of the human body, who knows what new solutions we might find.
So, we've been talking about all this, and something that really stood out to me from this research is how much we still don't know about male infertility.
It is kind of humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, like for all the progress we've made, there are still so many questions.
So many unanswered questions.
It really just goes to show you how complex the human body really is and how much more there is to discover. And that's why this research is so important. We got to keep asking those questions, keep pushing the boundaries of what we know.
And that's where our listeners come in, too. By staying curious, asking questions, supporting those organizations that are doing this research, they can be a part of finding those answers. Developing those new treatments, it's a team effort, really.
It really is. And I got to say, I'm feeling optimistic. I think that with more research and more open conversation, like what we're doing here, the future of male infertility treatment is looking pretty bright.
I totally agree. I mean, think about all the possibilities. New technologies, personalized medicine, understanding how our genes and environment interact. It's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what breakthroughs might be just around the corner. Discoveries that could change so many lives, change so many families. Well, this has been an awesome conversation so far, wouldn't you say? We covered the causes, the treatments, how lifestyle plays a role, all that good stuff. But there's another really important piece of this puzzle that we can't ignore.
You're right. We've talked a lot about the physical side of things, but we haven't touched on the emotional and psychological impact this can have on men.
And that's something we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive. Because, it's not just about the science, it's about the human experience.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into male infertility. It's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say? We've really explored a lot, from the biological nuts and bolts to those different treatments, and even just how lifestyle choices can play a big role.
It has been a fascinating deep dive, that's for sure. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, throughout all of this is the importance of just talking about it. Open communication.
I'm totally with you on that. We've talked about how important it is for couples to talk to each other, families, friends, everyone. But it goes way beyond that, right? It does.
We need that open communication in the medical field, in research, even just in society in general.
Absolutely. Because for way too long, male infertility has been this thing that nobody wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
It's been hidden under all this silence and stigma. And that's what prevents men from, reaching out for help, from getting support, from feeling understood. It can be a really lonely experience.
You really can. And on top of that, it also slows down research and progress. Like, if we're not talking about it openly and honestly, then we're not going to put the resources and the energy toward finding solutions.
You're so right. We need more dialogue, more awareness, more research to really wrap our heads around this and address it in a meaningful way.
I mean, this whole deep dive, this is our little contribution to breaking that silence.
Love it. And to everyone listening out there, if you are dealing with male infertility, just know you're not alone. There are resources out there, people who understand what you're going through, and most importantly, there's hope.
So well said. As we've been discussing all this, another thing that really struck me from the research is how much is still unknown about male infertility.
It is pretty humbling, right? For all the advances we've made, there are still so many unanswered questions.
Like, it really highlights just how complex the human body really is.
Yeah.
And how much more there is to discover. That's why this research is so crucial. We can't stop exploring. We can't stop asking questions.
And that's where, everyone listening comes in too, by staying curious, asking those questions, supporting organizations that are doing the research. They're part of the solution because finding answers, developing new treatments, it really does take all of us.
It does. And I gotta say, thinking about the future, I'm feeling optimistic. I think that with more research, more open conversations like the one we're having here, the future of male infertility treatment is looking pretty bright.
I'm right there with you on that. Think about it. New technologies, personalized medicine, a deeper understanding of how our genes and our environment all play together, the possibilities are huge.
It really gets you excited to think about those breakthroughs that might be just around the corner. Those discoveries that could change the lives of so many people, change families.
Absolutely.
Well, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. We talked about what causes male infertility, the different ways to treat it, how lifestyle factors come into play, all really important stuff.
It has been a really great discussion.
And for everyone listening, we really hope that this deep dive gave you some valuable knowledge, empowered you to ask questions, and maybe even sparked a bit of curiosity in you to keep learning more. Because even though this episode is ending, the conversation doesn't have to. Keep learning, keep sharing your experiences, and keep advocating for your health.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.